Hello and welcome. I'm very happy you are here today. This video is made for people who want to learn English. It is easy to follow and good for practice. You will hear clear sentences and see the words on the screen. Stay with me for 5 minutes, and you can start learning and feeling inspired. One small choice can change your whole life. For me, it started with just 5 minutes. Sometimes our life changes in a big moment, but sometimes it changes in a small, quiet moment. My name is Alex, and this is the story of the day I stopped procrastinating, and the day my life finally began to move forward. As you listen, follow the words on the screen. You can hear the right pronunciation and see how sentences are made. If you don't know a word, pause and listen again. This is a great way to practice reading and listening. You can learn step by step and grow more confident every day. Thank you for choosing Easy English Official. I am happy you are here, and we will learn and feel inspired together. Chapter 1. The Heavy Fog of Delay. The truth is, my name is Alex, and for many years, I lived inside a heavy fog that I could not see but could always feel. That fog had a name, and its name was procrastination. It followed me from morning to night, covering my life like a quiet shadow. It made every dream feel far away, and every goal feel impossible. I always believed I had time. My books stayed on the shelf, untouched and waiting for a perfect day that never came. My important projects collected dust while I promised myself that I would start them soon. Soon became later, and later became never. My life was a long list of things I planned to do, but never began. Every morning I woke up with hope and told myself that today would be different. I said, today I will finally start. Today I will finally work. But as soon as I picked up my phone, everything changed. 5 minutes online became 1 full hour, and one TV episode became an entire afternoon before I even noticed. The guilt grew heavier each day, and I felt it deep inside my chest. I felt tired even when I did nothing, because doing nothing takes more energy than people think. I felt stuck in a cycle that held me like a cage with no door. I couldn't break free, and I didn't know how to begin. In high school, I learned how to run away from pressure instead of facing it. When homework felt hard, I delayed it again and again. When exams scared me, I escaped into games and videos instead of opening my book. At that time, delay felt like comfort, like a soft place to hide from fear. I kept telling myself the same secret promise. I will do it later. I still have time. I repeated that sentence so often that it became a part of me. I didn't know that these small delays were not small at all. I didn't know that later would quietly steal years from my life. At first, procrastination felt harmless, like a tiny habit I could fix any time. But slowly, it became my way of living. It became the voice in my head that said, not now, tomorrow, maybe next week. And I listened, again and again. Without noticing, I let delay control my days. Even when I relaxed, I couldn't truly relax. My mind whispered all the tasks I didn't finish, like a quiet alarm that never stopped ringing. Even during fun moments, a small part of me felt guilty. I carried that unfinished work everywhere I went, like a heavy backpack I couldn't take off. My sleep became shallow and my nights became long. I lay awake thinking about the work I still hadn't done. My weekends were not peaceful because the weight of delayed tasks followed me. It didn't matter if I tried to enjoy myself. The stress never left my thoughts. I started to realize that procrastination was not protecting me, it was hurting me. It took away my peace, my rest, and even my joy. I lived every day in quiet worry, afraid to start and afraid to stop. I felt like a prisoner inside my own mind, fighting a battle no one else could see. One day, I lost a dream client I had wanted for years. I had 3 full weeks to send a proposal, but I kept telling myself, tomorrow, tomorrow. The file waited on my desktop, untouched and ignored. By the time I sent it, the opportunity was already gone. They chose someone else. I remember the moment I read the rejection email. My heart dropped, and I felt my stomach twist with regret. It wasn't just a lost job. It was a lost chance, a lost door, a lost breakthrough. I realized that procrastination had not only wasted my time, it had stolen my future. I sat alone that night staring at the empty space on my desk where that opportunity should have been. I felt ashamed, not because I failed, but because I didn't even try. I let fear and delay win without a fight. And that hurt more than any mistake I could have made. That loss became a mirror I didn't want to look into. It showed me the truth about my life. It showed me how many chances I had missed. It showed me how many dreams were slowly dying because I was too scared to start. It showed me how much I was holding myself back. I remembered times when teachers believed in me, when friends encouraged me, when family supported me. All those people saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. But I wasted their support. I wasted their trust. I wasted my own potential because I kept choosing later. There were nights when I felt angry at myself. I asked, why can't I just start? Why do I always wait? But no matter how hard I tried to understand, I felt lost. I wasn't lazy. I knew that deep inside I cared a lot. I dreamed a lot. But I still couldn't move. The truth was simple. I didn't delay because I didn't care. I delayed because I cared too much. I was scared to fail. Scared to disappoint myself. Scared that my work would never be good enough. So I chose not to start because not starting felt safer than failing. But safety has a price. A very high price. I paid with years of stress, years of missed chances, years of emotional weight I carried alone. I didn't understand how heavy it was until it finally broke something inside me. It broke my confidence. It broke my spirit. There was a moment when I looked at my messy desk, my unfinished tasks, my long list of laters, and I felt something shift. I felt tired of my own excuses, tired of my delays, tired of living in fog. I knew something had to change, even if I didn't know how. That night, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. Sadness for the years I lost, but hope for the years I could still save. I realized that change doesn't begin with a big decision. It begins with a small feeling, a small awareness, a small spark inside your heart. I sat in silence, breathing slowly, trying to understand myself. And for the first time in years, I stopped blaming myself. I started listening to myself. I started understanding that procrastination wasn't my enemy. It was a signal, a sign that something inside me needed healing. I thought about who I used to be before fear took over. I remembered the younger version of me who dreamed boldly, who believed he could do anything, who wasn't scared of mistakes. I wanted to meet that version of myself again. I wanted to bring him back. As I sat there, something inside me changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. It was a soft voice saying, "You can try again." It was the beginning of a new chapter, even though I didn't know it at the time. It was the first tiny step out of the fog. That day didn't fix everything. It didn't turn me into a different person, but it woke me up. It made me see the truth about my life, my habits, and my fears. It made me understand that the first step doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. The fog was still there, but for the first time I could see a small path through it. A narrow, simple, quiet path that said, start small, start now, start today. And that small path would soon lead me to the moment that changed my life forever. Chapter 2. The Hidden Cost of Fear. Fear is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, hiding behind excuses and comfort. I was not lazy, I was scared. Scared to start, scared to fail, scared that my work would never be perfect. Every time I thought of a task, my heart beat faster, and my mind found reasons to delay again. One evening, my friend Sarah visited. She looked around my room and saw the mountain of unfinished papers on my desk. She looked at me with calm eyes and said, "Alex, those papers are not heavy. The real weight is the work you are not doing." Her words hit me like a sudden storm. I could feel their truth deep inside me. She sat down across from me and spoke slowly, carefully. "Alex," she said, "you think successful people wake up motivated? No, they wake up just like you. The difference is simple. They start. You are waiting for motivation. But motivation is a myth. Action comes first, then motivation follows." I listened, feeling a mix of shame and hope. Her words stayed in my mind for days. I realized that my fear had a face, and its name was perfectionism. I wanted the perfect sentence, the perfect plan, the perfect moment to begin. But perfection never came. And because I waited for it, I did nothing. I was trapped, paralyzed by my own standards. Perfectionism is not always about high quality. I learned it is fear wearing a mask. It is the voice inside that says, "Not yet, not now. Wait until you are ready." And that voice had controlled me for years. I finally saw it clearly, like a shadow on my wall that could not hide anymore. Every morning I planned to start something important. Every morning I told myself, "Today will be different." And every morning fear whispered, "Not yet. You are not ready." The cycle repeated endlessly, and I began to understand that fear was stealing more than my time. It was stealing my life. One night, I imagined my future self, sitting alone in a quiet house, an 80-year-old man, tired and full of regrets. Not regrets for the things he did, but for the things he never started. That image shook me to my core. It made me feel small, fragile, and desperate for change. I could see the lost opportunities stretching across my life like empty streets. The friendships I could have nurtured, the dreams I could have pursued, the chances I could have taken, all blocked by fear and delay. I felt the weight of every choice I avoided. It was heavy, crushing, almost unbearable. Sarah's words echoed in my mind again. Action comes first. Motivation follows. I repeated it quietly. Like a mantra, I tried to believe it, to let it sink into my heart. But fear laughed at me. Fear said, 5 minutes is not enough. What if it is wrong? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The problem was never the work itself. It was me, standing in the way. I was afraid to fail, afraid to be judged, afraid that I would never reach the high standard I imagined. I realized I had spent years building a prison out of my own mind. The bars were made of what-ifs and not-yets. I remembered small tasks I had delayed, things that seemed unimportant at the time. Each one was a brick in that prison. A phone call, a letter, a simple email, all delayed. And each delay taught my mind that fear is stronger than action. I wanted to break that lesson. I needed to break it. I began to understand that fear grows stronger when ignored. The more I avoided, the bigger it became. Every small task I put off was like feeding a shadow, giving it life. And every day, that shadow whispered, "Wait longer. You are not ready." I could see now how much control it had over me. I thought about all the moments I had wanted to act, but had frozen instead. I could still feel the energy of those moments trapped inside me, waiting for release. The frustration and guilt of lost time pressed on my chest. I wanted to scream, but the voice inside said, "Not yet. Wait." It was hard to admit, but I loved comfort too much. I loved hiding behind safety, behind delay, behind the thought that everything could wait. I enjoyed small pleasures because they were easy, but every pleasure carried the guilt of what I avoided. I realized that fear had disguised itself as comfort for far too long. I thought about my life without fear, a life where I began without perfect plans, without waiting for courage to arrive. I imagined waking up, picking up a task, and simply doing it. I could feel a small spark of excitement, a tiny hope, a whisper telling me, "You can try." That night, I promised myself to try not everything, not all at once, just one small step. I did not know what it would be, but I knew I had to move. The first step was always the hardest, but it was the only way to fight fear. I felt my heart pound, but I also felt life return to my chest. I realized that procrastination and fear are partners. Fear makes delay easier. Delay makes fear stronger. And the only way to escape both is to act, even when scared. I had to teach my mind that small action is stronger than big fear. That lesson would take time, but it was necessary. I remembered Sarah's eyes, calm and full of certainty. She believed I could change. Even when I didn't, I decided to believe in her words. And slowly, I began to believe in myself. It felt strange at first, but I could feel the cage in my mind start to loosen. I wrote a short list of small tasks that night. Nothing big, nothing overwhelming, just tiny steps I could take tomorrow. The list was simple, but it was a start. I could see the faint path of movement through the fog. That path had been invisible before, but now it was there, calling me forward. I imagined the new version of myself, someone who begins even when afraid, someone who does not wait for perfection, someone who understands that life grows only through action. The image was faint, but it was real. I could feel the possibility of freedom. By the end of the night, I realized that fear could be faced, not by avoiding, not by thinking, not by planning perfectly, but by moving, by beginning, even in small ways, even imperfectly. I felt a flicker of courage rise inside me, small but alive. The next morning, I woke up with a different feeling, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. The fog of fear was still there, but I could see through it. I could see a path, narrow but real. I knew that small actions would build a new life, that small courage would break the chains of fear. I understood something important. Fear is not the enemy. Delay is not the enemy. Both are signals, signs that we are ready to grow, ready to act, ready to change. And that understanding gave me hope. Hope that I could fight, hope that I could move, hope that I could become the person I wanted to be. That night, I went to bed with a strange peace. Fear had not disappeared, but it had lost some of its power. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready to take one step forward, just one. And that step, I knew, could lead to a life beyond fear. It could lead to freedom. Chapter 3. The Simple Power of the 5-Minute Rule. I realized I needed a simple change, something small but powerful. Not a big plan, not a complicated system. Just one rule that could help me start. I wanted to break free from fear and delay without feeling overwhelmed. I needed a rule that felt safe and doable. That's when I created the 5-minute rule. The idea was simple. If I didn't want to do a task, I only had to do it for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Nothing more. No pressure, no perfection, no fear of failure. It was a tiny step, but it could lead to big change. I set a timer for 5 minutes and began my first task. My heart was beating fast, my hands felt tense, and my mind whispered excuses. But I focused on the timer, the small task, and nothing else. I told myself. Just 5 minutes. That's all. And then I started. When the timer rang, something strange happened. I didn't want to stop. My hands wanted to keep moving. My mind wanted to keep going. I realized that the hardest part had been starting. Once I began, momentum built itself, quietly, naturally, without force or strain. The brain hates big tasks. They feel dangerous, overwhelming, almost threatening. That's why we avoid them. The longer we wait, the bigger they feel, and the harder it becomes to begin. The 5-minute rule tricks the brain. It makes the task small, manageable, and safe. 5 minutes feels easy, tiny, almost unimportant. But this small start prepares the mind to continue. Psychologists call this cognitive priming. It warms up the brain and allows action to follow naturally. It is the gentle nudge that beats procrastination every time I remember my first victory vividly. I picked up my pencil, feeling nervous and unsure. The room was silent except for my own breathing. My heart pounded and my hands shook, but I wrote, one line at a time, for 5 minutes. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. When the timer rang, I felt a wave of pride. For the first time in years, I had started and finished something small. I had taken action. I had broken the cycle of fear and delay. That small moment gave me hope, energy, and belief in myself. I realized change was possible. After that first attempt, I applied the 5-minute rule everywhere. I cleaned my room for 5 minutes. I stretched and exercised for 5 minutes. I wrote one email or one paragraph for 5 minutes. I even planned my day for 5 minutes. Every small start created momentum. The rule worked in unexpected ways. Tasks that felt impossible suddenly became manageable. Big, scary projects turned into small, achievable steps. Fear lost its power when I knew I only had to do 5 minutes. That tiny window was enough to begin, and beginning was the key. I started my mornings with 5 minutes of work. I started afternoons with 5 minutes of reading or writing. I discovered that consistency was more important than intensity. Even small actions, repeated every day, created progress I never imagined. Small victories grew into big results. 5 minutes became 10, then 20. Momentum built like a small snowball rolling down a hill. Tasks I once avoided became routine. Each small start added confidence, skill, and clarity. I began to see that the 5-minute rule was not just about tasks, it was about life. I realized the rule applied to my habits, too. I used it to exercise, clean, cook, and even talk to people I had avoided. I learned that starting small removed fear, it removed resistance, it removed excuses, and it made life feel lighter, easier, and more possible. The first week was magical. Each day I felt lighter, freer, more capable. 5 minutes became my secret weapon against delay. Every task I completed, no matter how small, reminded me I could act. I began to believe in myself again. I began to trust my ability to start. I noticed subtle changes in my mind. I worried less about perfection. I worried less about outcomes. I worried less about starting. Each 5-minute success taught me that action creates motivation. Action gives energy. Action is stronger than fear. The 5-minute rule also gave me courage to try bigger tasks. Once I started, I realized I could continue. 5 minutes led to 15, 15 to 30, 30 to completion. Starting had been the barrier. Once that barrier fell, everything changed. Action became my habit. I shared the rule with friends, and they tried it too. They told me it worked for them. They used it to clean, study, write, and exercise. I saw that this simple rule could help anyone, everywhere. It was universal, simple, and effective. A tiny habit with huge impact. I began to notice patterns. Tasks that seemed impossible were only impossible before I began. Fear and procrastination made them feel bigger than they were. But once I started, the size disappeared. The task became manageable, simple, and achievable. I started applying the rule to work projects. A report that felt overwhelming became manageable when I committed just 5 minutes. An email I had avoided for weeks became easy to write. Slowly, my productivity increased, and my confidence grew. I was no longer paralyzed. The 5-minute rule changed my relationship with time. I realized that starting matters more than planning. I learned to trust that beginning will lead to progress. I discovered that momentum is built in motion, not in waiting. Action creates results, not thought alone. I also noticed a change in my mindset. I felt more in control. I felt capable. I felt alive. The habit of beginning small shifted how I saw myself. I was no longer a prisoner of fear and delay. I was a person who could act, even imperfectly, and that was enough. I experimented with combining tasks. I started small habits that led to bigger habits. 5 minutes of writing led to a daily journal. 5 minutes of exercise led to a morning routine. 5 minutes of cleaning led to a tidy room. Small steps became chains of positive change. Even failures became easier. When I stumbled or gave up, I could always start again. 5 minutes lowered the stakes. 5 minutes gave permission to be imperfect. 5 minutes reminded me that starting is more important than finishing perfectly. Fear lost its power. By the end of the month, I felt transformation. I was not finished, not perfect, but I was moving. I was alive. I was free from the paralysis that had held me for years. Each small action created a new identity. A person who begins, a person who acts, a person who grows. I understood that the 5-minute rule was more than a productivity tool. It was a life lesson. Action comes first. Momentum follows. Motivation is created by doing, not waiting. And that small rule would guide me to the life I wanted. Step by step, day by day, I felt hope again. Real hope. The kind that grows from small victories, from tiny steps, from the courage to begin. I knew that with this simple rule, I could tackle anything. Big dreams, big goals, big projects, all became possible because I learned to start. The 5-minute rule was my breakthrough. It was the first step out of fear, out of procrastination, out of delay. It gave me freedom, confidence, and clarity. And most importantly, it gave me proof. I can start, I can act, I can grow. All it took was 5 minutes. Chapter 4. The domino effect of consistency. That small rule changed everything in my life. I started to notice small wins every day. 5 minutes became 10, 10 became 20. Each tiny action added up, and slowly I became consistent. Consistency, I realized, was the secret my life had been missing for years. Every morning, I began with a small task I worked for just 5 minutes. No pressure, no expectation. That tiny start set the tone for the entire day. I began to see that showing up mattered more than doing everything perfectly. Action became my habit. and my habit became my strength. I became reliable in ways I never imagined. My tasks were completed, my projects moved forward, my responsibilities were met. People noticed. I noticed. I could feel confidence growing quietly inside me. Consistency, I learned, is stronger than motivation, stronger than willpower alone. I learned the magic of 1% improvement. If you become just 1% better each day, in 1 year, you don't just double your skills, you become 37 times better. It's not 2 times, not 3 times, but 37 times. Small actions, repeated, compound into massive change. The math is simple, the effect is profound. Each day, I focused on one tiny improvement, 5 minutes longer, one extra paragraph, one small task done without delay. It felt almost invisible at first, but over weeks and months, I could see the growth. It was subtle, but real, undeniable, and inspiring. Small steps create big results. I discovered the power of habit stacking. I linked small actions together. After making my morning coffee, I would immediately start my 5-minute task. After brushing my teeth, I cleaned my desk. One simple habit triggered another, and soon my routines flowed naturally, without struggle or effort. My life became smoother and lighter. The tasks that once felt heavy were now automatic. The energy I spent on resisting had disappeared. I could now focus on creating rather than avoiding. The domino effect was real. Small actions created bigger actions, and bigger actions changed my life. Even my work changed. I finished projects earlier, met deadlines effortlessly, and gained trust from colleagues. I was no longer the person who procrastinated. I became someone people could rely on. My reputation improved, and I felt proud of my ability to take action consistently. Relationships began to shift too. I became a better friend, a more attentive partner, a more dependable colleague. People noticed my reliability and respected it. I noticed my own confidence growing. Fear and anxiety, which had ruled me for years, began to fade quietly, like mist under the sun. Every small success reinforced the next one. Each completed task strengthened my habit of beginning. Each morning I worked for 5 minutes. I was reminded that progress is possible. The small rule was no longer small. It had become a foundation for my life. I could see the transformation taking shape. The domino effect worked in all areas of life. Exercise became easier when I started small. Cleaning became less stressful. Learning new skills became possible when I began with 5 minutes a day. Every small action reinforced the habit of beginning, and momentum grew naturally. I learned that consistency is more important than intensity. Long hours occasionally do not build habit. Small efforts repeated daily build skill, confidence, and results. This principle was simple but life-changing. The small rule created a framework that carried me forward every day. My confidence grew quietly, steadily, like water filling a jar, drop by drop. I no longer feared starting. I no longer delayed. I no longer let perfection or fear hold me back. The feeling of reliability strengthened my sense of self. I was no longer defined by what I hadn't done. The 5-minute rule taught me patience. Growth does not happen overnight. Small actions, repeated consistently, eventually create change that is undeniable. I began to trust the process, trust myself, and trust the power of tiny steps. Progress, I realized, is patient but unstoppable. I noticed that my anxiety had decreased. Tasks no longer seemed overwhelming. The weight I had carried for years had lifted slightly, day by day. I could breathe easier. I could think clearly. Life felt lighter. Fear no longer ruled my schedule or my mind. I began to enjoy completing tasks. Each tiny victory gave a spark of satisfaction. It reminded me that I am capable, that I am able, that small action is always better than inaction. The joy of completion, even of a small task, began to replace the guilt I had carried for years. The domino effect spread into my personal life. I became proactive, responsive, and dependable. People began to notice the change in me, and their trust and respect increased. I realized that the way I treated my tasks reflected how I treated myself and the people around me. I also learned that consistency is freedom. Freedom from anxiety, freedom from guilt, freedom from fear. Each small step I took built independence and confidence. I could act without waiting for perfect conditions. I could start without needing permission. I was free in my actions. Even my mindset shifted. I began to see challenges as opportunities. I began to see tasks as steps forward rather than obstacles. I began to see that life responds to consistent effort, no matter how small. Momentum, once gained, creates unstoppable growth. The habit stacking method reinforced every area of life: morning routines, work habits, cleaning habits, learning habits. All became easier when small actions were linked together. My life no longer required constant discipline. It flowed naturally. Habits carried me. I realized that my transformation was not about doing more, but about doing consistently. Action, repeated, became identity. I was no longer someone who procrastinates. I was someone who begins. I was someone who moves, and this identity changed my life from the inside out. Even setbacks no longer crushed me. If I failed one day, I could start again. The domino effect helped me recover. Consistency created resilience. Every small attempt built a stronger version of myself. Life no longer felt fragile, it felt expandable and alive. By the end of several months, I felt unstoppable. My life had shifted from chaos to flow. I knew the secret was not luck, not talent, not big plans, but small, consistent action. The 5-minute rule had become the engine of my transformation. I became someone who finishes things. I became someone people could rely on. I became someone who trusts myself and respects my own efforts. Life had changed, not magically, but methodically. Each day, small action built momentum, and momentum built a new me. The transformation spread into every corner of life. My health, my work, my relationships, my mind, all improved. I was no longer reactive. I was proactive. I was no longer fearful. I was courageous. Small, consistent actions had changed everything. The domino effect was real and powerful. I understood that change is simple but not easy. It begins with small actions, repeated consistently, with patience and belief. Each day I became 1% better, and over time, that 1% compounded into life-changing growth. The small rule had changed everything, and I could see it clearly. I had become a different person quietly, without drama, without magic, without luck. The 5-minute rule, consistency, and habit stacking had rebuilt my confidence, my focus, my energy, and my life. I was no longer trapped by delay, fear, or perfection. I was free to grow, step by step, day by day. Chapter 5. Action over anxiety. The day I stopped procrastinating was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, small, almost invisible. I did not make a speech or announce a plan. I made a choice, a simple choice. I chose to start. And that choice changed everything. I picked a small task, the one I had delayed for days. I did not think about the result. I did not aim for perfection. I simply began. The act of starting, though small, felt huge. It broke the chain of delay that had held me for years. I felt alive again. If you are listening now, maybe you feel the same fog I felt. The heaviness of delay, the fear of failing, the stress of unfinished work. It is suffocating. It steals your energy, your focus, your happiness. I know because I lived in that fog for years. People often say, I don't have time. I understand I said it too, but nobody finds time. We make time. The procrastinator spends hours thinking, worrying, and waiting. The productive person spends 5 minutes doing. That small act creates movement. That movement creates life. The first 5 minutes are the hardest. They feel small, but are powerful. Starting is everything. Once you begin, momentum builds. 5 minutes can lead to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to completion. The magic is not in effort alone. The magic is in beginning. That is where change starts. Finishing a task feels amazing. There is peace in completion. Calm replaces anxiety. Light replaces the weight of delay. Guilt vanishes. Your mind can finally rest. Each completed task frees your spirit, even if it is small. That freedom is addictive and transformative. When I chose action over anxiety, life became simpler. The fog lifted a little each day. My mind cleared. My confidence returned. I no longer waited for courage or motivation. I acted, imperfectly but consistently, and every action built a new me. Small victories added up. I thought about my future often. I imagined the life of endless delay and the life of action. The contrast was stark. One was heavy, full of regret, fear, and stress. The other was light, calm, and full of possibility. I wanted the second life, and I knew it began with one choice. I realized procrastination is not laziness. It is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of imperfection. Action is the antidote. 5 minutes of courage weakens fear. One small step breaks the chain of avoidance. You learn that the world will not end if you begin. I began to see opportunities I had ignored. Tasks that seemed impossible were suddenly manageable. Calls I had postponed were answered. Emails I had delayed were sent. Small actions led to progress. Progress built confidence. Confidence transformed my day-to-day life. I learned to celebrate small wins. Every completed task, no matter how minor, was a victory. These wins gave energy to continue. They reminded me that I am capable, that I am in control, that action works. Small victories compound over time, and life changes quietly but powerfully. I also noticed the ripple effect. Starting one small task encouraged me to start another. Momentum spread across my day, my week, and my life. Small steps, repeated consistently, created a domino effect. Fear lost its grip. Action became the habit, and habit became identity. I began to wake up with purpose. Each morning I knew I would act, even for 5 minutes. I did not wait for motivation. Motivation followed action. I worked with clarity, focus, and calm. Life felt lighter. The anxiety that once ruled me no longer controlled my choices. I imagined the new me, calm, focused, confident, working on tasks without delay, feeling the satisfaction of progress daily, living life fully rather than waiting for the perfect moment. That image motivated me more than fear ever could. I wanted to be that person. Even small tasks mattered. Washing dishes, writing emails, stretching for 5 minutes, each counted, each built momentum. Each reminded me that action is stronger than fear. Consistency is stronger than procrastination. Small steps are stronger than waiting for perfection. The process is everything. I realized that waiting achieves nothing. Thinking achieves nothing. Only action creates results. Even imperfect action creates learning, growth, and progress. You do not need to know the entire path. You only need to take the first step, and the next step will appear. I asked myself repeatedly, what is the one thing I have delayed today? I wrote it down. I acted for 5 minutes. That small choice gave me power. It gave me control over my time, my mind, and my life. Each day became an opportunity to act and grow. The day I started, life changed gradually. Each task I completed removed the weight of delay. Each 5-minute effort added lightness and freedom. I realized that the smallest choice can have the biggest impact. The day you begin is the day you reclaim your life. Fear still comes. Doubts still whisper. But I have learned that I do not need to wait until I feel ready. I do not need to feel perfect or motivated. I only need to begin. 5 minutes is enough to start. 1 step is enough to move. Action is always stronger than anxiety. I invite you to try it today. Write down one task you have been delaying. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Begin. You do not need to finish perfectly. You only need to start. That first step will create momentum. That first action will start your transformation. Your life can change today, not tomorrow, if you act. Small choices repeated daily build momentum. Momentum builds habit. Habit builds identity. Identity shapes the life you want. One choice, one step, one 5-minute action can lead to freedom. Remember, action is stronger than fear. Consistency is stronger than willpower. Small wins are stronger than hesitation. Start small, start now, and your life will shift. The fog of delay will lift, and you will find clarity, confidence, and calm. Today, I am calm, focused, and confident. I wake up with purpose and clarity. I act with intention and freedom. I live my life instead of delaying it. I am no longer held back by fear or perfection. I am free to grow, create, and become my best self. Now I ask you, what is the one thing you have been delaying? Write it down. Start with 5 minutes. Begin today. Even the smallest action moves you toward your goals. Even the smallest choice changes your life. Take that first step now. Thank you for listening, and keep learning with me. Action creates change. Momentum builds life. Your 5 minutes today can create a lifetime of transformation. Start now and watch your life change. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope this story gave you hope, strength, and a new beginning. Remember, your future changes the moment you start. Even a small action can create big results. Start with just 5 minutes today. Take one step and watch your life slowly transform. Keep learning, keep practicing, and keep acting. See you in the next video, here on Easy English Official. Your journey has just begun.